Dad, please, don't leave me. I remember my voice shaking as I ran after him, but he didn't even turn around. He just put his arm around his new wife, kissed her on the cheek, and walked out of the station with her kids like I wasn't even there. I was 14, standing in the middle of the crowd with a beat-up backpack and $20 in my pocket. I sat on that cold bench for 6 hours waiting for him to come back. He never did. That night, while I was still at the station, hungry and scared, he posted a picture from a resort with the caption, "Making memories with the ones who matter most." That was the day I realized I had been erased from his life and the day my story truly began. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I know how heavy that pain is. Hit the like button so this story can reach someone else who needs to hear it. And subscribe because what happened after that night will leave you speechless. To understand how I ended up abandoned at that station, we have to go back to that morning. Sitting in my father's car, I still believed that he cared about me. The air inside my father's car felt heavier than the November sky pressing down on the city. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, trying to ignore the silence stretching between us. He hadn't said a word since picking me up from Mom's apartment that morning. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the occasional squeak of the windshield wipers, clearing away a misty drizzle. I shifted in my seat, hugging my backpack against my knees. It wasn't much. Just a few clothes, my history textbook, and the $20 I had saved from babysitting jobs. Dad had told me vaguely that we were taking a little trip, but he never explained why. I thought maybe he wanted time with me, just the two of us like we used to have before everything changed. I was desperate to believe that. "Dad," I finally said, my voice soft in the stale air. "Are we going to be back before Monday? I have that presentation on the Civil War. Remember? I told you I've been working on it for weeks." His hands tightened on the steering wheel, the knuckles going pale. "You'll figure it out, Rachel," he muttered without looking at me. His tone was flat, dismissive, the kind of voice you use when you want to end a conversation before it even begins. Something twisted in my stomach. That wasn't my dad's voice. Not the one I grew up with. This wasn't the man who used to stay up late helping me glue planets onto a cardboard solar system in 3rd grade, or who cheered the loudest at my middle school debate competition. That man had disappeared 6 months ago, the day he married Vanessa. Since then, everything about him had shifted. He dressed differently, spoke differently, even smelled different. Expensive cologne replacing the faint scent of coffee and motor oil I used to associate with him. Most of all, the way he looked at me changed. He used to see me. Now his eyes slid past me like I was an obligation he couldn't wait to set down. I glanced at him, hoping for some trace of the father I remembered, but all I saw was a clenched jaw and eyes focused straight ahead. His silence pressed against me harder than any words could. My mind drifted back to Thanksgiving, only a week ago. Vanessa had wrinkled her nose at my old jacket and whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "She looks homeless." Dad didn't defend me. He just laughed awkwardly, as if agreeing would keep the peace. That laugh had stung more than her insult. It told me everything I needed to know. I was no longer worth protecting. Sitting in that car, I tried to convince myself this trip was something good, some father-daughter time I had been craving for months. But deep down, a small voice whispered the truth. I was being pushed out. Vanessa's perfect blonde daughter, Chloe, had already started calling him Dad. Her little brother Ethan followed him around the house, begging for attention I could no longer get. And Dad seemed happy to give it. The streets outside grew less familiar as we drove. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, watching the gray blur of buildings pass by, each one taking me farther from the home I used to know. My chest ached with questions I couldn't ask. Did he still love me? Was I still his daughter? Or had I been quietly replaced without even realizing it? When the red brick facade of Central Station finally came into view, a knot of dread tightened in my throat. It looked like something out of an old movie with its clock tower and heavy wooden doors. But to me, it felt like the set of a nightmare. Dad pulled into the drop-off zone instead of the parking lot. And that's when I knew. Whatever was about to happen, it wasn't a trip. I clutched my backpack tighter, wishing for courage, wishing for answers, wishing for my father to turn and tell me everything was okay. But he kept his eyes on the clock tower, and the silence between us grew into something unbearable. I didn't know it then, but that car ride was the last time I would ever sit beside him and believe, even for a moment, that I still had a father. As the car rolled to a stop in front of the station, the silence between us felt like a wall I couldn't break through. Dad still hadn't told me why we were here. He didn't offer an explanation, didn't even look at me. He just popped the trunk and got out, his movements sharp and impatient. My hands trembled as I held onto my backpack, but the fear tightening in my chest wasn't born in that moment alone. It had been building for months, through small cuts and quiet rejections that told me I was being replaced. I remember the first time I noticed it. Vanessa had invited me to dinner at her house, a week after she and Dad announced their engagement. I sat at the long, polished table, my hands folded in my lap, while Chloe twirled around in her designer dress. Vanessa smiled proudly at her daughter, then glanced at me. "Rachel, sweetie, do you own any clothes that fit?" she asked, her voice dripping with honey but sharp as glass. Dad laughed, not nervously, not protectively, but like he agreed. My cheeks burned, and I stared down at the spaghetti on my plate, wishing I could disappear. It didn't stop there. At Thanksgiving, I wore my favorite jacket, the one Mom had bought me before things with her drinking got bad. It wasn't new, but it was warm, and it felt like home. Vanessa wrinkled her nose. "Thomas, she looks like she's been sleeping on a park bench." My father didn't defend me. He poured himself another glass of wine and changed the subject. I remember twisting the sleeves between my fingers, swallowing back tears, telling myself not to care. But I did. I cared more than I could admit. Then came the smaller, quieter betrayals. Dad stopped asking about my grades, even though I used to bring him every report card like a trophy. He used to frame my drawings when I was little, sticking them on the fridge with magnets. Now, the fridge in his new house was covered with Chloe's artwork and Ethan's stick figure superheroes. Mine had been thrown away. At night, when I slept over, I could hear laughter drifting up the stairs. Vanessa's laugh, Chloe's giggles, Ethan's squeals of delight. Sometimes Dad's voice, warm and playful. I'd creep out of my room, hoping to be part of it, but the moment I appeared at the top of the stairs, the room would fall quiet. Their eyes would flick toward me, and I'd feel like an intruder in what used to be my own family. The worst part wasn't the insults or the silence. It was how easily Dad let it all happen. How he let Vanessa's sharp words cut me. How he watched Chloe wrap her arms around his waist and call him Dad, and didn't even glance at me. I wanted to scream, to ask him why I wasn't enough, why he didn't fight for me. But the words stuck in my throat every time. I was afraid of the answer. So when he pulled my backpack out of the trunk at the station that day, it didn't feel like a single betrayal. It felt like the final blow in a series of wounds that had been bleeding for months. His face was tight with impatience, his eyes darting toward the entrance where Vanessa and her kids were waiting. I caught a glimpse of Chloe's smirk, Vanessa's triumphant little smile, and I understood with painful clarity. They weren't just there to pick him up. They were there to watch him leave me behind. "Here," Dad said flatly, shoving the backpack into my hands. "You're old enough to figure things out." I wanted to ask him what he meant. Figure what out? Where was I supposed to go? But the words tangled in my throat. My heart pounded in my ears as I realized that every small rejection, every laugh at my expense, every silence when I needed him to speak up, it had all been leading here. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a choice. The November air slapped my face as I stepped out of the car. Dad was already at the trunk, pulling out my backpack with more force than necessary, like he couldn't wait to get rid of it. Or me. The weight of his silence pressed harder than the cold. For months I had felt the quiet cuts, the little ways I was being pushed aside. But now I could feel it solidifying into something sharp and irreversible. Dad? My voice cracked as I clutched the straps of my jacket. Aren't you coming in with me? He didn't answer. He shoved the backpack at me, eyes flicking nervously toward the glass doors of the station. I followed his gaze and my stomach dropped. There they were. Vanessa, her blonde hair perfectly curled despite the damp air, her manicured hand resting lightly on Chloe's shoulder. Chloe wore a new designer coat, the kind I'd only ever seen in store windows, while Ethan was glued to his phone, thumbs flying over the screen. Vanessa's eyes met mine. For a moment, her lips curved into a smile. Not warm, not kind, but sharp. The kind of smile that said she had won. Chloe's gaze lingered on me, her expression somewhere between pity and satisfaction, before she leaned into Vanessa's side. Ethan didn't even look up. Dad? I said again, louder this time, panic climbing my throat. You haven't given me a ticket. Or money. Where am I supposed to go? He still didn't meet my eyes. Instead, he walked toward them, shoulders relaxing for the first time all day as Vanessa slid her arm around his waist. He kissed her cheek like I wasn't standing there, like I wasn't his daughter. His hand ruffled Ethan's hair, the way he used to do to me. Dad. The word ripped out of me, desperate and raw. Heads turned. A businessman in a gray suit shot me an annoyed look as he hurried past. An elderly woman paused, her brow furrowed with concern. But the one person I needed to turn around kept walking. They moved together toward the exit, a perfect picture of a family. I stood rooted to the pavement, my backpack weighing down my shoulders, my heart hammering against my ribs. The world blurred as hot tears filled my eyes. For a split second, I convinced myself he'd come back. Maybe this was some cruel joke, some test. Any second he'd laugh, turn around and say, "Come on, Rachel, let's go." But he didn't. Vanessa's laugh floated back to me, light and triumphant as the glass doors shut behind them. The station around me buzzed with life. Trains screeched in and out. Announcements crackled over the loudspeakers. Families rushed past carrying luggage and coffee. Everyone had somewhere to be. Someone waiting for them. Everyone except me. My hands shook as I gripped the straps of my backpack tighter. I could still see Dad's back in my mind, the way he leaned toward Vanessa, the way he held her kids close. That image burned deeper than any words. He wasn't just distracted. He wasn't just careless. He had chosen them over me. The truth crashed over me like ice water. Every moment of silence, every laugh at my expense, every time he let Vanessa's words cut me, it had all been leading here. To this moment. To this betrayal. I wanted to scream, to run after him, to force him to look at me and explain why I wasn't enough. But my feet stayed planted, frozen in place as the crowd swirled around me. My throat ached with words I couldn't say. My father had walked away, and no amount of begging could bring him back. The station clock struck 3:15, its chime echoing through the cavernous hall. I stared at it through blurry eyes, realizing that time was still moving forward, even if my world had just shattered. This wasn't just a goodbye. It was an erasure. The glass doors closed behind them, and just like that, they were gone. My father, his new wife, her children, all walking into a future that didn't include me. I stood frozen in the middle of the station, my backpack digging into my shoulders, the noise of the crowd swallowing me whole. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The air felt sharp, like I was inhaling ice. I stumbled toward the benches lined up against the wall and sank down on one of the cold metal seats. My legs trembled so badly I was afraid they'd give out. Around me, the station pulsed with life. Families hugged as they reunited. Couples kissed hello and goodbye. Children laughed as they clutched stuffed animals and clung to their parents' hands. Their joy was like salt in an open wound. I pulled my backpack onto my lap and unzipped it, half hoping I'd find something that could anchor me. All I had were a few changes of clothes, my history textbook, and that crumpled $20 bill. I held the bill in my palm, staring at it like it might magically solve everything. $20 wouldn't buy me a ticket anywhere worth going. $20 wouldn't bring my father back. The hours dragged. I kept checking the clock, convincing myself that he'd come back at any moment. I imagined him rushing through the doors, guilt written all over his face, saying, "Rachel, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Let's go home." Each time the clock ticked forward, hope flickered and died a little more. The noises of the station grew louder as the day stretched into evening. Announcements echoed through the loudspeakers. The squeal of brakes marked each new arrival. The chatter of strangers filled the air. But none of it touched me. I felt like I was underwater, cut off from the world around me. My chest ached with a hollow kind of pain I'd never felt before. A pain that whispered I had been replaced, erased, discarded. I watched a little boy climb onto his father's lap on the bench across from me. His father wrapped him in a hug, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. The boy giggled, safe and loved. My throat tightened. That used to be me. That used to be my dad. Tears stung my eyes, hot and uncontrollable. I wiped them away quickly, embarrassed even though no one was watching me. I didn't want to look weak, but the truth was, I had never felt weaker in my life. The more I tried to hold it in, the more it spilled over until my vision blurred and I buried my face in my hands. When my sobs finally subsided, I pulled out my phone, desperate for a distraction. That's when I saw it. A new post from Dad on Instagram. The photo was of him at a resort, raising a glass of champagne beside Vanessa, Chloe, and Ethan. They were all smiling, the picture of a perfect family. The caption read, "Making memories with the ones who matter most." The words hit me harder than the cold, harder than the hunger gnawing at my stomach. The ones who matter most. It wasn't me. It hadn't been me for a long time. But seeing it there, written out for the world, felt like a knife twisting deep inside. I dropped the phone into my lap, my hands shaking. For 6 endless hours, I sat on that bench. Hungry, cold, alone. Each minute was a reminder that I wasn't wanted. Each second was proof that I had been erased from his life, as easily as deleting a photo or changing a caption. By the time the clock struck 9, the station had emptied. The crowds had thinned, the families had gone home, the laughter had faded. I was still there, sitting in the same spot, waiting for someone who would never come back. And somewhere deep inside, I understood. This wasn't just about that day. This was forever. By the time the clock struck 9, the station had grown quiet. The steady stream of families that had filled the place hours earlier was gone, replaced by a few tired travelers dragging suitcases across the floor. The lights overhead hummed softly, casting a sterile glow on the nearly empty hall. I sat slumped on the same cold bench, my arms wrapped around my backpack, my stomach growling. 6 hours had passed since Dad walked away. 6 hours of waiting, hoping, and finally realizing he wasn't coming back. I wiped my face with my sleeve, the fabric stiff with dried tears. My eyes burned, my throat ached, and a heavy numbness had started to replace the panic. It was like my body finally understood the truth my heart was still fighting to reject. He had chosen them, and he wasn't turning back. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" I looked up, startled. An older woman stood a few feet away, her face lined with kindness and concern. She wore a faded scarf and carried a shopping bag filled with groceries. Her eyes softened when she saw my red, swollen face. I tried to nod, but my voice betrayed me. "My dad. He left me." Her lips pressed together, and she let out a small sigh. "Honey, no child should be left alone like this." She sat beside me, careful not to crowd me. "Do you have someone you can call?" "A friend? Family?" Family. The word twisted inside me. For so long, family had been a source of pain. Mom was lost in her drinking, Dad had just erased me, and Vanessa had made sure I never felt welcome. For a moment, I thought I had no one left. But then a name bubbled up, one I hadn't dared to say aloud in months. Grandma Margaret. Dad had forbidden me from contacting her after the divorce, claiming she meddled too much. I'd snuck calls when I was younger, whispering into the phone late at night, but he always found out and punished me. Eventually, I stopped. Still, her number was burned into my memory. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone. The battery was low, the red bar glaring at me, but I dialed anyway. My heart pounded as the line rang once, twice. I almost hung up, afraid she wouldn't answer. Or worse, that she'd forgotten me. Then her voice came through, warm and steady. "Hello? Grandma?" My own voice cracked on the word. "It's me. It's Rachel." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Rachel? Oh, my sweet girl." Her tone shifted instantly, fierce and protective. "What's wrong? Where are you?" The words tumbled out in a rush. "Dad dropped me at the train station." "He's gone, Grandma. He left with Vanessa and her kids. I've been here for hours." I don't know what to do. For a moment, there was silence. Then her voice, strong and certain. "Listen to me, Rachel. None of this is your fault. Do you hear me? None of it. Stay right where you are. I'm coming to get you." Tears spilled down my cheeks again, but this time they felt different. Not empty, but relieving. "Are you sure?" Dad said. "I don't care what he said," she cut in firmly. "You are my granddaughter. You always will be. I'll be there in 90 minutes. 90 minutes, after 6 hours of being invisible, of feeling erased. 90 minutes suddenly felt like salvation. I ended the call and sat back, clutching the phone in my hands. For the first time all day, a flicker of warmth spread through my chest. Someone still wanted me. Someone was coming. Across the station, the clock ticked forward, but this time I didn't feel crushed by its sound. For the first time since Dad turned his back on me, I let myself believe there might still be a future waiting. A future that didn't depend on him. That night, on that cold bench, I lost my father. But in the same moment, I found my lifeline. The drive from the train station to my grandmother's house felt unreal, like I had slipped into someone else's life. My grandmother, Margaret Blackwood, had arrived at the station with her driver in a sleek black sedan. She swept me into her arms the moment she saw me, her perfume of lavender and old books filling my nose as I buried my face into her shoulder. "You're safe now," she whispered, stroking my hair, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe. As we pulled away from the station, I tried to piece together what was happening. My father had abandoned me. That part I understood. But Grandma's arrival hinted at a story I hadn't been told. I pressed my forehead against the window, watching the city give way to winding roads and gated neighborhoods I'd never seen before. When the car finally turned onto a long cobblestone drive lined with oak trees, my mouth fell open. At the end of the road stood a sprawling mansion, its stone walls lit softly by lanterns, the kind of house I'd only seen in magazines. It looked timeless, powerful, like it had been standing for centuries and would stand for centuries more. "This is your house?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. "Our house," Grandma corrected gently. "The Blackwood estate." I followed her inside, my sneakers squeaking against the polished marble floor. Portraits of stern-looking men and elegant women lined the hallways, their painted eyes following me as I walked past. A crystal chandelier glowed overhead, scattering light across the grand staircase. I felt completely out of place, a girl in a thrift store jacket clutching a beat-up backpack, standing in the middle of a palace. "Grandma," I said slowly, turning to her. "Why didn't I know about any of this?" She guided me into a sitting room filled with dark wood furniture and the faint smell of leather and old cigars. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and looked me directly in the eyes. "Because your father didn't want you to know." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She explained everything. My grandfather had built a vast business empire, one worth nearly $90 million. When he passed away, the fortune was divided carefully. My father received $6 million outright, money he had already burned through in a few reckless years. The rest was tied up in trusts, protected from waste and manipulation. And then came the revelation that made my stomach twist. $12 million had been set aside in a trust fund for me. It would become mine when I turned 18, or sooner if my guardianship was challenged in court. "Your father knows this," Grandma said, her voice steady but filled with anger. "And he's been trying to find a way to get his hands on it." I sat there in shock, my heart pounding in my ears. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The coldness in his eyes, the way he let Vanessa belittle me, the laughter that excluded me. It wasn't just that he didn't love me anymore. It was that he saw me as a barrier to the money he believed was his. "But he left me at the station," I said slowly. "If he wants my money, why would he—" "Because abandonment changes things," Grandma interrupted gently. "If he can paint you as unstable, unfit, or unable to care for yourself, he can petition the court for guardianship of your trust. He left you there to break you down, Rachel, to make you look weak." The room tilted around me. My father hadn't just walked away out of neglect or distraction. He had done it on purpose. It was a strategy, a move in a twisted game I hadn't even known I was playing. Anger flared hot in my chest, mixing with a grief so heavy I thought it would crush me. How could he? How could the man who once kissed me goodnight and told me I was his whole world turn around and plot to use me like this? I buried my face in my hands, tears slipping between my fingers. "I thought he didn't want me," I whispered. "But it's worse. He only wanted what I have." Grandma leaned forward, her voice firm but full of love. "He may have money in his eyes, but you have something stronger. You have me, and together we're going to fight him." Her words steadied me, just enough to lift my head and meet her gaze. For the first time since that awful moment at the train station, I didn't feel completely powerless. I still felt broken, betrayed, and furious. But underneath all that, a spark lit inside me. If this was a game he had started, I was done playing the role of his pawn. The days after moving into Grandma's house felt like stepping into a different universe. For the first time in years, I had a warm bed, 3 meals a day, and someone who actually asked me how I was feeling and cared about the answer. But the comfort didn't erase the storm brewing beneath the surface. Grandma wasn't one to hide the truth. She believed knowledge was power, and she wanted me to be armed with it. A week after she brought me home, she called me into her study. Stacks of folders were spread across the mahogany desk, papers clipped neatly, highlighted sections glowing under the lamp. "Rachel," she said, her voice calm but heavy. "There are things you need to see, things your father has been doing in your name." I sat down, my stomach twisting. She handed me a folder. Inside were copies of credit card statements, cards I had never opened, accounts I had never touched. My name was printed on each one, but the purchases were unmistakably not mine. Thousands spent at luxury hotels, jewelry stores, high-end restaurants, a $5,000 charge at a casino in Atlantic City, another for first-class tickets to Cancun. My throat went dry. This isn't me." "I know," Grandma said, her jaw tight. "Your father forged your information. He used your social security number. He built debt under your name so he could spend freely without consequences." I stared at the papers, my heart pounding. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had felt at that station. Abandoning me was cruel, but this was calculated theft. He hadn't just left me behind. He had taken pieces of my future and sold them off for champagne and poker chips. "Why would he do this?" I whispered. Grandma's eyes softened with sorrow. "Because he thinks he can still win. If he can show that you're drowning in debt, he'll argue you're irresponsible, incapable of managing your inheritance. He'll claim he needs to step in as your guardian." I pushed the folder away, bile rising in my throat. The thought of him standing in a courtroom, painting me as unstable while holding evidence of debts I didn't make, made my chest burn with rage. He wasn't just trying to erase me. He was trying to destroy me. But the worst blow was yet to come. 2 days later, I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of hot cocoa when Grandma's phone buzzed. She answered, her voice sharp. "Linda? Why are you calling now?" My head snapped up. Mom. I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. My heart leapt with a fragile kind of hope. Maybe she'd finally realized what Dad had done to me. Maybe she wanted to help. I watched Grandma's face as she listened, her lips thinning into a hard line. When she hung up, I could barely breathe. "What did she say?" Grandma hesitated, her hand covering mine on the table. "She said Thomas has been in touch with her. He promised her a share of your inheritance if she supports him in court. He wants her to testify that you're unstable, that you can't be trusted on your own." The words hit me like a punch. I felt the air leave my lungs. "My own mom? She's vulnerable, Rachel," Grandma said gently. "The drinking, the debts. He knows how to use her weaknesses. But don't mistake her choice. She's siding with him because she wants the money." I sat frozen, the mug of cocoa cooling in front of me. It wasn't just Dad anymore. It wasn't just Vanessa or Chloe. Now even Mom was turning her back. Hot tears blurred my vision. So I don't have either of them. Not Dad. Not Mom. Grandma squeezed my hand firmly. "You have me. And you have the truth. That's more powerful than their lies." But the comfort couldn't erase the ache. I wanted a mother who would hold me and tell me she believed me. I wanted a father who would choose me over greed. Instead, I had two parents plotting together to strip me of everything I had left. That night, I lay awake in the grand bed of the Blackwood estate, staring at the ceiling. The silk sheets and carved headboard felt like another world, but inside I was still that girl on the cold bench, abandoned with a backpack. Only now the betrayal went even deeper. The realization settled over me like a stone. This wasn't just about family anymore. This was war. The night I learned both my parents had betrayed me, I barely slept. I lay awake in the massive four-poster bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the weight of it all. My father had abandoned me at a train station and stolen in my name. My mother, the person I still clung to in my heart, had agreed to help him. The two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally saw me only as a paycheck. I woke up with swollen eyes and a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. At breakfast, Grandma watched me push eggs around my plate without eating. She didn't lecture or rush me. Instead, she folded her napkin and said calmly, "Rachel, I know you feel broken, but you are not weak. We are going to make sure no one ever erases you again." That afternoon, she introduced me to Dr. Emily Carter, a therapist who specialized in trauma and adolescence. I was skeptical. Talking about my feelings had never been safe in my family. But Dr. Carter's office was warm, lined with books and soft chairs. She looked at me without judgment, her voice gentle as she asked, "Rachel, what do you want to say that you've never been allowed to say?" The words came haltingly at first, then like a flood. I told her about Vanessa's insults, about Chloe smirking when Dad ignored me, about waiting on that cold bench for 6 endless hours. I confessed the shame that twisted in my stomach every time I thought about him choosing them. And I admitted something I'd never said out loud. I feel like maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe if I had been better, he wouldn't have left. Dr. Carter leaned forward, her eyes steady. "Rachel, his choices are not your fault. You cannot make someone love you who chooses not to. But you can choose yourself. That's where your power begins." Her words struck something inside me. For the first time, I allowed myself to believe that my father's cruelty wasn't proof of my worthlessness. It was proof of his greed. Grandma didn't stop there. She brought in a tutor to help me catch up on schoolwork I'd been too distracted to focus on. She introduced me to Mrs. Turner, a poised woman who taught me how to speak with confidence, how to hold my shoulders back when I walked into a room, how to answer questions without shrinking. "Courtrooms and cameras can be cruel," Mrs. Turner said. "But if you stand tall, if you speak your truth clearly, people will listen." At first, I stumbled. My voice cracked when I practiced reading statements aloud. My hands shook when I tried to make eye contact. But little by little, something shifted. Each time I spoke, the tremor in my voice grew smaller. Each time I stood in front of the mirror, I saw less of the scared girl from the train station and more of someone who might be able to fight back. One afternoon, Grandma brought me into the Blackwood Library, a cavernous room lined with shelves from floor to ceiling. She placed a stack of legal documents in front of me. "These are the cases your father will try to build. These are the arguments he'll use. I want you to understand what we're up against." I traced the words with my fingers, the legal jargon daunting at first. But Grandma guided me patiently, explaining what each term meant. It was overwhelming, but it also ignited something in me. Knowledge. Power. The very tools he had used against me could become the weapons I used to defend myself. Meanwhile, the outside world was watching. The security footage of my abandonment had leaked online, spreading across social media like wildfire. Strangers debated my life as if it were a TV drama. Some people called me a spoiled rich kid crying for attention, but others rallied behind me, sharing their own stories of being abandoned, ignored, erased. The hashtag Justice for Rachel trended nationwide. At first, reading the comments terrified me. But then I saw messages from people who said my story gave them courage. A girl wrote, "My dad walked out on me too. Seeing you speak makes me feel less alone." A boy added, "They always said I was the problem. You remind me it's not my fault their words lit a fire inside me. This wasn't just about me anymore. If I could stand tall, if I could fight, maybe I could carry all of them with me." One evening, after a long day of therapy and training, I stood in front of the mirror in my room. I adjusted my posture, lifted my chin, and practiced the words Mrs. Turner had drilled into me. My voice matters. My story matters. I matter. For the first time, I almost believed it. By the time I was starting to find my voice in therapy and training, the world outside had already decided to tell my story for me. It began with a single video, grainy footage from a security camera at the train station. The clip showed me standing alone with my backpack while Dad walked away with Vanessa and her kids. You could hear my voice faintly through the station speakers calling, "Dad, please don't leave me," before it cracked and broke. The sight of me collapsing onto that cold bench spread across the internet like wildfire. Within 24 hours, millions had seen it. The hashtags came next. News outlets picked it up, plastering still frames of my tear-streaked face on headlines. Teen abandoned at train station by father and stepfamily. I watched from the Blackwood Library as reporters debated my life on morning shows, their polished voices speculating about my pain like it was entertainment. At first, the support was overwhelming. Strangers flooded my social media with messages. "Stay strong, Rachel. You're not alone. What your dad did is unforgivable." Survivors of neglect and abandonment shared their stories, finding pieces of themselves in mine. I read through them late at night, crying not just for myself, but for all of us who had been made to feel disposable. But the internet isn't kind for long. With the love came the cruelty. Some claimed I was lying. No dad would just leave his daughter like that. She must have done something to deserve it. Others painted me as a spoiled heiress, faking victimhood for attention. Look at the mansion she lives in now. She's not abandoned. She's rich. Even worse were the whispers planted by Dad's camp. Anonymous accounts insisted I was unstable, that I had run away on purpose, that the video didn't tell the whole story. Vanessa's friends shared curated photos of their perfect family vacations, captions carefully crafted to make me look jealous and bitter. The pressure crushed me. I would sit in my room scrolling through the comments until my chest felt tight and I couldn't breathe. It didn't matter that thousands of people defended me. My eyes always locked on the ones who said I was crazy, unwanted, pathetic. One night, I slammed my phone shut and whispered to Grandma, "Maybe they're right. Maybe I am the problem." She took the phone from my hands and set it aside. "Rachel, listen to me. The truth doesn't need everyone to believe it. It only needs you to stand by it." Her voice was sharp with conviction. "Your father is trying to win in the court of public opinion before he faces a real court. Don't let him." Her words echoed in my mind the next morning when Mrs. Turner asked me to practice giving a statement on camera. At first, my voice shook and my palms sweated. But then I remembered the girl in the video. The girl sitting on that bench, crying as the world passed her by. I owed her my strength. So I looked straight into the lens and said, "What you saw in that video is real. My father left me. He chose money and appearances over his own child. But I'm not going to be erased. Not anymore." When the clip was released, the response was immediate. Supporters rallied harder. The hashtag Justice for Rachel surged again, this time with my voice behind it. But the other side dug in too. Dad's lawyer released a statement claiming the footage was taken out of context, that I was troubled, and in need of help my grandmother refused to give. The divide grew sharper. Every headline, every comment thread became a battlefield. Half the world saw me as a symbol of resilience. The other half saw me as a spoiled brat in a family feud. It hurt. God, it hurt. But for the first time, the pain didn't silence me. It pushed me. Because every cruel comment, every doubt, every accusation reminded me of the truth I already knew. My father was willing to destroy me for money. And I wasn't going to let him. As I stood in front of the mirror that night, I whispered the words, "Doctor." Carter had given me. My voice matters. My story matters. I matter. And this time, I didn't just almost believe it. I did. The cracks in my father's perfect facade were widening, but he wasn't about to let it all collapse without a fight. If there was one thing I knew about Thomas Monroe, it was that he hated losing, especially when it came to power, money, or reputation. When Vanessa stormed out of their house and the tabloids plastered photos of him standing alone in the driveway, he retaliated the only way he knew how, by going public. A week later, he sat in a glossy studio chair across from a well-known TV anchor. The cameras rolled, the lights burned bright, and his performance began. He wore a tailored navy suit, his hair combed back neatly, his expression carefully rehearsed to strike the balance between pain and dignity. "I love my daughter," he began, voice low and heavy with false emotion. "I've always loved her. But Rachel has been struggling for years. She's unstable. My mother-in-law is manipulating her, filling her head with lies because she's always hated me. That video..." He paused, as if the memory wounded him. "That video doesn't tell the whole story." I sat in Grandma's living room, fists clenched around a mug of tea, watching him twist the truth with every word. On the screen, he painted himself as a victim, a father unfairly vilified by an ungrateful daughter and a vindictive grandmother. He claimed the credit card debt was a clerical mistake. He claimed the journal entries from Ethan were misinterpreted ramblings from a confused child. But the worst was when he looked straight into the camera and said, "Rachel knows I've always been there for her. She just doesn't want to admit it. And I'll keep fighting for her because she's my daughter and I refuse to give up on her." My stomach turned. He hadn't fought for me at the station. He hadn't fought for me at holidays or birthdays or all the nights I cried myself to sleep feeling invisible. Now he was only fighting to protect his money and his pride. The interview aired on every major channel. Some people bought his act, commenting online that he looked sincere, that maybe I had exaggerated. But others saw through him. "If he cared so much, why did he leave her on that bench?" One tweet read. "A suit can't cover up the truth." Still, the damage was done. He had muddied the waters, planting doubt in people's minds. And worse, he had declared war on me in front of the whole country. That night, I broke down in Grandma's study. "What if he wins?" I whispered, tears streaking my cheeks. "What if the judge believes him? What if everyone believes him?" Grandma knelt beside me, gripping my hands. Her eyes were fierce, steady. "Rachel, listen to me. Lies are loud. But the truth, your truth, will last longer. You don't need everyone to believe you. You just need the right people. And you need to believe yourself." Her words lit something inside me. For months, I had been reacting, surviving, defending, waiting. But sitting there, I realized something had changed. I wasn't the girl on the bench anymore, hoping someone would come back. I was standing now with proof, with allies, with a voice that was finally steady. The next day, Mrs. Turner had me practice again in front of a camera. "Remember?" she said. "He's trying to control the story. The only way you beat him is by telling yours better." I stared into the lens, my reflection staring back at me, and I spoke. My voice didn't shake. My eyes didn't drop. I told the truth. Not just about what happened at the station, but about the months of rejection, the credit cards, the manipulation of my mother, and the way he tried to erase me. When the recording ended, Mrs. Turner smiled for the first time since we started working together. "That's the girl who will win in court," she said. For the first time, I believed her. The storm outside was raging louder than ever, but inside me, the storm had started to quiet. I still felt the sting of betrayal, the ache of losing the parents I had wished for, but those feelings no longer defined me. What defined me was the fire I felt when I remembered his words in Ethan's journal. Rachel will disappear forever. Number. I wouldn't disappear. Not now. Not ever. This was no longer just a fight for survival. It was my chance to stand up, to take back everything he had tried to steal, and to prove that I mattered. A new chapter was beginning, and I was ready. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and coffee, the kind of place where lives are rewritten with the slam of a gavel. My palms were damp as I clutched the edge of the table, trying to steady the rhythm of my breathing. Across the room sat my father. It had been months since the train station, months since I had last looked directly into his eyes. He was dressed in a tailored suit, the navy one he wore for television interviews, his tie perfectly knotted. To anyone else, he might have looked like a respectable businessman. But to me, he looked like the man who had left me on a bench with $20 and walked away. When the judge entered, everyone rose. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to stand tall. Grandma sat beside me, her hand brushing mine, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. The trial began with formalities, documents submitted, attorneys stating their names. My father's lawyer was smooth and polished, speaking of family misunderstandings and a child manipulated by outside influences. He gestured toward me with feigned sympathy. Rachel has been under significant emotional distress, he said. We believe her grandmother has fueled this narrative for her own vendetta against Mr. Monroe. My stomach twisted. He wasn't just denying what happened. He was accusing me of being a puppet. Then it was my father's turn. He stood, placing a hand dramatically over his heart. I would never abandon my daughter, he said, his voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. That day at the station was a miscommunication. She misunderstood my intentions. I love her. I've always loved her. I almost laughed, bitter and hollow. Miscommunication? Was leaving me for 6 hours on a freezing bench just a scheduling error? When my lawyer rose to present our case, the tone shifted. She displayed the credit card statements first. Accounts in my name, tens of thousands in debt. The judge's eyebrows arched, the first crack in the polished facade of my father's story. Next came Ethan's journal. The courtroom grew silent as my lawyer read his words aloud. Dad said Rachel will disappear forever. He said she's too much trouble. Gasps rippled through the gallery. My father's face tightened, his jaw clenching as the judge scribbled notes. Finally, the video played. The grainy footage of me clutching my backpack, calling after him, my voice echoing off the station walls. On the screen, he kept walking, his arm around Vanessa, never turning back. I couldn't watch. I stared at the table as the sound of my own crying filled the room, fresh tears burning my eyes. But I forced myself to stay seated. I needed them to see. When the video ended, the judge looked directly at my father. This does not appear to be a misunderstanding, Mr. Monroe. Then it was my turn. My knees shook as I walked to the witness stand, but Mrs. Turner's training echoed in my mind. Shoulders back, chin up, speak the truth. I sat down, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Rachel, the judge said gently, you may speak. I took a deep breath. That man is my father, and I begged him not to leave me. He didn't forget me. He didn't get distracted. He chose to walk away. My voice cracked, but I pressed on. He chose them over me. He chose money over me. He always chooses himself, and I can't trust him anymore. I don't want to live waiting for someone who's already decided I don't matter. The silence that followed was heavy, every eye on me. My father shifted in his seat, his mask slipping for a second as anger flared in his eyes. When I stepped down, my legs were trembling. but inside something felt solid. For the first time, I hadn't begged. I hadn't cried. I had spoken the truth, and no amount of his lies could erase it. After hours of arguments and counter-arguments, the judge delivered the ruling. Custody was awarded to my grandmother, effective immediately. My father was denied visitation until further review. The gavel struck, sharp and final. My father slammed his fist on the table, his face red, his voice raised in protest. But it didn't matter. For once, his words held no power. The law had spoken. As we left the courtroom, reporters swarmed, shouting questions, cameras flashing. But all I heard was Grandma's steady voice in my ear. "You did it, Rachel. You stood up for yourself." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. The custody ruling should have been the end of it. The gavel had fallen, the law had spoken, and I was finally safe in Grandma's care. But my father was not the kind of man to accept defeat quietly. If he couldn't win in court, he would try to win in the court of public opinion. 2 days after the ruling, he called a press conference. Cameras flashed as he stood at a podium, his lawyer and Vanessa by his side. He wore the same navy suit, but this time his face looked tired, his expression crafted into a portrait of paternal heartbreak. "My daughter has been taken from me," he declared, voice heavy with feigned sorrow. "This is not justice. This is manipulation by my mother-in-law, who has despised me for years. Rachel is a confused child being used as a pawn. I only want what's best for her." The reporters nodded, scribbling notes, their microphones thrust forward. He held up photos of me from years ago, trying to rewrite the narrative. "Look," he said, pointing at an image of me smiling on his shoulders at the beach. "Does this look like a father who doesn't love his daughter?" At home, I watched the broadcast from the living room couch, my stomach twisting. Each word was another knife, each photo a weapon twisted into my story. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes theatrically, Chloe scowled at the cameras, and the whole performance was broadcast nationwide. The comments online exploded. Some people bought into his act. Maybe the grandma is controlling her. Kids can be dramatic. This looks like family drama gone too far. But others saw through him. If he loves her so much, why is there a video of him walking away? Photos don't erase abandonment. Still, the doubt he planted gnawed at me. He was trying to drown out my voice with his lies. And if I stayed silent, maybe he'd succeed. That night, Grandma sat me down at her desk. "Rachel, you have a choice. You can hide and let him control the story, or you can speak. But if you choose to speak, you must be ready. Once you step into the spotlight, there is no stepping back." I thought about the girl on the bench, crying into her hands while the world moved on. I thought about Ethan's diary, Chloe's mocking posts, Vanessa's cruel smile. And I thought about the thousands of strangers who had written to me, saying my story gave them courage. "I'll speak," I said firmly, this time, in my own words. The next day, we filmed an interview at Grandma's house. It wasn't glossy or staged, just me, sitting on the couch in jeans and a sweater, hands folded tightly in my lap. The journalist asked gentle but direct questions, and I answered with nothing but the truth. I described the silence in the car that morning, the way he shoved the backpack into my arms, the sound of my own voice cracking as I begged him not to leave. I talked about the credit cards, the debts, the way he tried to use my mother against me. And when they asked how I felt watching him call me confused on national television, I looked straight into the camera and said, "I'm not confused. I'm not a pawn. I'm his daughter, and he chose to walk away." The interview aired that evening. The impact was immediate. Hashtags surged again, but this time it wasn't just justice for Rachel. It was "We Believe Rachel." Support poured in from celebrities, activists, ordinary people across the country. My inbox overflowed with messages. "You're so brave. Thank you for speaking for kids like me. Don't let him silence you." Of course, the attacks didn't stop. My father doubled down, releasing more statements, more accusations. But something had shifted. For every person who doubted me, 10 more stood by my side. I realized then that this was bigger than just me and my father. This was about the countless kids who had been told their pain didn't matter, who had been erased by the people meant to protect them. My voice wasn't just mine anymore. It was theirs, too. That night, as I scrolled through the flood of messages, one stuck with me. "Your story made me feel seen. For the first time, I don't feel invisible." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. My father could hold 100 press conferences. He could lie. He could twist. He could perform. But he couldn't take this away from me. I wasn't invisible anymore. And I never would be again. The custody battle had given me safety. The media storm had given me a voice. But the criminal trial was where everything would finally be decided. It wasn't just about who I lived with anymore. It was about justice. It was about whether my father would finally face the consequences for what he had done. The charges were heavy: fraud, identity theft, child abandonment, and reckless endangerment. His lawyers fought tooth and nail to dismiss them, calling the evidence circumstantial, insisting the media frenzy had poisoned public opinion. But the judge refused to back down. The trial would proceed. Walking into the courtroom that day felt different from the custody hearing. The atmosphere was heavier, more formal. Journalists packed the gallery, pens ready, cameras flashing before being ushered out. I could feel the weight of every eye on me, but I also felt the steadiness of Grandma's hand on my shoulder as we took our seats. When my father entered, he looked smaller than I remembered. The suit was still sharp, the tie still perfect, but the confidence had cracks. His eyes darted nervously around the room, and for the first time, I thought I saw fear. The prosecution began with the financial evidence: bank statements, credit card applications, and receipts, all with my name forged at the bottom. The jury leaned forward as the prosecutor explained how he had used my Social Security number, how the debt piled up under my identity while he lived lavishly. Each document was a nail in the coffin of his credibility. Then came the testimony. Vanessa was called to the stand. She looked pale, her usual polish cracked by weeks of pressure. Under oath, she admitted what we already knew. She had known about the cards, the spending, the lies. Her voice trembled as she said, "Thomas told me it was necessary. He said Rachel would never know. He said it was just numbers on paper." The defense tried to paint her as a bitter ex, but her words rang true. And when the prosecution presented emails she had exchanged with him, any remaining doubt evaporated. But the most powerful testimony came from Ethan. He was young, too young to carry such a burden, but his small voice filled the courtroom as he read from his own diary. He described the fights, the shouting, the bruises on his mother's arm. And then he repeated the line that had haunted me since I first heard it. "Dad said Rachel will disappear forever." The jury shifted uncomfortably. Some looked directly at my father, their eyes hard. His lawyer objected, claiming Ethan was too young to understand, but the judge overruled. Truth has a way of cutting through excuses. Finally, it was my turn. I took the stand, my hands trembling slightly as I placed them on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. I told them about the train station, how he shoved the backpack into my hands, how I begged him not to leave, how I sat there for 6 hours until Grandma came. I spoke about the humiliation of finding debt in my name, the betrayal of knowing he saw me as a bank account instead of a daughter. My voice cracked when I said, "He didn't just abandon me. He planned it. He tried to erase me, and he would have succeeded if not for my grandmother." When I stepped down, I felt drained, like I'd poured out every last piece of myself. But I also felt lighter. The truth was no longer mine to carry alone. It was in the open, undeniable. The defense scrambled, painting me as dramatic, Vanessa as vengeful, Ethan as confused. But the evidence was overwhelming. When the jury returned after hours of deliberation, the air was electric. I gripped Grandma's hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. On the count of fraud, guilty. On the count of identity theft, guilty. On the count of child abandonment, guilty. On the count of reckless endangerment, guilty. Each word struck like thunder. My father sat rigid, his face drained of color. When the judge announced the sentence, 18 years in federal prison, no parole for the first 10, he slammed his fist on the table, shouting protests no one believed. The bailiff moved to restrain him, his voice drowned out by the gavel. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just sat there, stunned. After everything, after months of being erased, doubted, humiliated, justice had spoken. As he was led away in handcuffs, he turned once to look at me. His eyes were full of anger, not remorse. But for the first time, that anger didn't scare me. It freed me. Because I knew then, his power over me was gone. When the gavel struck for the last time and my father was led away in handcuffs, I thought I would feel triumphant. And in a way, I did. The chains he had wrapped around my life had finally been broken. But what I felt most wasn't victory. It was release. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up with dread pressing against my chest. I woke up with possibility. Life at the Blackwood estate shifted. Grandma no longer hovered in constant worry. Instead, she encouraged me to take steps on my own. Therapy sessions with Dr. Carter continued, but now they were filled less with tears and more with planning. College applications, goals, the foundation I dreamed of starting for kids like me. At 17, I legally changed my last name from Monroe to Blackwood. Signing the papers felt like wiping away the last trace of the girl who sat on that bench, waiting for a father who never came back. I wasn't erasing myself. I was reclaiming myself. By 18, I was accepted into Yale. I threw myself into my studies, determined to understand the law not just as a victim, but as a future advocate. My inheritance became more than money. It became a tool. I started a foundation for abandoned children, providing legal aid and safe housing for those who had nowhere else to go. Each child I met reminded me of myself, and each one fueled my resolve. But there was one part of my past I couldn't leave untouched. It was Ethan who brought me back. He was 13 when the trial ended, and though Vanessa tried to shield him, he chose to stay in contact with me. Letters at first, then calls. He was quieter than Chloe, softer, carrying guilt he didn't deserve. One day he asked me, almost whispering, "Rachel, can we go back? To the station?" So we did. On a brisk autumn afternoon, years after that night, I walked through the familiar glass doors of Central Station with Ethan at my side. The air smelled of coffee and train oil, just as it had then. Travelers bustled past us, families reunited, voices echoing off the high ceilings. For a moment, my chest tightened. I could see myself at 14, clutching that worn backpack, eyes red and swollen. Ethan's hand brushed mine nervously. "Were you really here? For 6 hours?" I nodded. 6 hours and 14 minutes. I counted every tick of that clock. He lowered his head, shame in his eyes. "I'm sorry. For everything. For not saying anything back then. For being part of them." I turned to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. Ethan, you were just a kid. None of this was your fault. And you helped more than you know. Your words, your truth, it saved me. We sat on the same bench where I had once waited, the metal now cool against my legs. I traced the grooves in the surface, remembering the tears that had stained it. But instead of despair, I felt a strange peace. Ethan glanced at me. Do you ever wonder, what if he had come back that night? I thought about it, staring at the steady stream of travelers moving through the station. Yes, I would have gone with him. I would have forgiven everything because I was so desperate for love. And that would have been the real tragedy, spending my life begging for love from someone who could never give it. We sat in silence for a while, the noise of the station swirling around us. Then I stood, slinging my bag over my shoulder. Come on, Grandma's making dinner. She hates when we're late. As we walked out of the station together, I turned back one last time. The bench was still there, waiting for another traveler, another story. But the girl who had once sat there was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone free, someone who had taken betrayal and turned it into a beginning. And this time, I wasn't walking alone. From the moment my father left me at that train station, I thought my story would end in silence. But instead, it became the beginning of something I never expected. I went from being the forgotten daughter, sitting alone on a cold bench with $20 in my pocket, to standing in court and facing the man who tried to erase me. Along the way, I discovered the truth about his lies. I watched my mother choose money over me, and I felt the crushing weight of being judged by millions of strangers. But I also found my strength. With my grandmother by my side, with therapy, with training, and with the support of people who believed me, I turned my pain into power. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I became my own voice. And when justice finally came, it didn't just free me from my father. It gave me back the right to exist, to be seen, to matter. Today, I carry those scars, but I carry them with pride. Because they remind me that even in the darkest moments, there is always a way forward. You can survive betrayal. You can rise from abandonment. You can reclaim your story. If this journey touched you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or fought to prove your worth, I want you to know you're not alone. Please give this video a like so it can reach others who need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge Stories, where every story is a reminder that no matter how deep the betrayal, justice, and strength are always possible. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.